This is Heal Your Mind, Heal Your Body with Dr. Schuyler. Discover how your thoughts manifest disease and what you can do about it. Here's your host, Dr. Schuyler.
Hello, beautiful souls. So I'm going to dive right into something called the power of belief. When I was healing from multiple sclerosis, I developed this motto, and I think it may sound a little bit harsh now thinking back on it, but it really helped me shift my mindset from being sick to this victim feeling to kind of shifting into more of a survivor mode. And when I was really sick, I would say to myself, so what? You're not dying. Like, so what? And I would have this really severe pain, and I would have the numbness and this really debilitating nausea, vomiting, and just usually these blinding migraines that would last for days. Just, you can't, anyone who's had a migraine understands this. You can't turn on the light. So once I was told my brain that I'm not dying from my pain, it's just pain, I began to reframe my approach and my belief. And without even knowing it, I began to reframe my perception of pain and all the stress that accompanied it. And I made this my philosophy. So what? Your leg's numb. Now what? You're not dying. So what? And I would say to myself, are you going to spend the rest of your life complaining, or are you just going to go live it? So I had what was called drop foot, and I would go on a walk or just anywhere walking, and my foot, without listening to my brain, it would just kind of drag and just my knee would kind of give out. And I remember I used to get so mad at my body for betraying me. I would say these horrible self-deprecating things like, I hate myself, I hate my body. And after I decided to get better, and I would say, well, you're not dying, you're just fine. I would begin to start shifting this, instead of hate to my foot, I would start shifting it some love. Like, I'd crack a joke and I would ask it, okay, can you please move? Like, I get my brain's not, and you aren't communicating, my foot and brain aren't communicating, but can you just listen to me, please? And sometimes I would pick my foot up and help move it. So half the time it would listen, and then I would start this comedic dialogue inside my head. Okay, please, just one time, just move it for me. And I'd pick up my dragging foot, and sometimes my toes would be like dragging on the ground. So I would position my foot where I needed it, and I would just send it this laughter and this compassion. And there was no point in berating myself anymore. I was going to live this life with this drop foot or with a wheelchair. There's no point in doubling down and making myself more miserable by talking to myself miserably. So I just started this shift in my healing process that I stopped hating my body and started seeing its lack of cooperation as a bad thing. I just stopped seeing it as it was bad. It just became more of this comedic relief for myself. And I began to alleviate the stress that surrounded having this drop foot in public. So I refused to make the lack of cooperation of my limbs stressful. And instead, I switched it to this internal dialogue like, okay, you're not dying. What can you do that we can build up your confidence? You want to go out in public. What can we do to kind of make this easier on you? So I live in Florida, and I've talked about this before. One of the staples of a Floridian diet is something called a pub sub, and it comes from a public grocery store, and it's a sandwich. And if you ever come to Florida, you've got to get a pub sub. They are so good. So I made it one of my rewards if I go out in public without a cane or a wheelchair that I get to get myself this pub sub. So it was a major task that I had deemed to be good stress, not bad stress. And that's what's really important. So as I'm walking, and I've told this story before, but this is a little different context. As I'm walking, my foot gives out and I fall into this puddle, for lack of a better word, of oil. And I've got this, oil stains all over me. And I just kind of got up and I laughed, and it got my pants all dirty. And I said, well, okay, I want a foot-long pub sub, so I'm still going to go in. And I gave myself this huge sense of accomplishment rather than, oh my gosh, and this berating myself. I'm so embarrassed. I can't go into Publix with this stain on me. I'm now hopping, I didn't make it a stressful bad thing. It was like, okay, whatever. I want my pub sub. So rather than hiding in shame and embarrassment, and I made the stress of grocery shopping. I made the stress of getting my pub sub, I made it good stress. And this began to build my self-efficacy. So my belief of no big deal shifted my entire experience, and I no longer was a victim to my stress. I had reframed it. So what evidence and science has shown, it's the power of our belief about stress that plays a critical role in determining whether it impacts our health or not. So our belief about stress, not the actual disruption of homeostasis, but the actual stress belief itself is what affects our immune system. That's because our beliefs can alter our body's responses. So viewing stress as harmful can exacerbate these negative effects. But seeing stress as a challenge, it can harness this positive potential. That Publix incident, that pub sub incident was potential. I saw potential for my future, my potential that my future could look different. I still may be using a cane. I still may be in a wheelchair. But my belief around those concepts, if I could tap into the potential that I could live a life in a more positive framework, in that moment, everything began to change for me. And so what research is showing that this stress mindset theory, it shows that people who view stress as enhancing their life, like this growth set mindset, experience better health outcomes opposed to those who see it as debilitating. So the Publix parking lot incident, I had two ways. I had two potentials how I wanted to view that falling in that oil. I can be stressful, ashamed, embarrassed, and go home, or I really want this pub sub. I'm going to go inside, and so what? I'm not dying. Our belief system around stress is what determines whether we get sick or not. And a heightened negative mindset around the concept of stress, not the homeostasis shift, but the mindset that stress is bad is what leads to this chronic disease. And I think it has a significant impact. I'm just curious. I challenge anyone out there to say how many times a day they say, I'm so stressed. And when they say that, do they mean it in negative context? So this intricate play between the mind and body, stress stands as both a necessary survival mechanism. We have to have it, but it's also this potential trigger for disease. So this dual nature of stress, it's called the stress paradox, and it affects our physical and mental health, and it really, really impacts GI and autoimmune. So I want to look at the stress paradox, diving into this mind-body connection and the implications of how you frame the concept of stress determines whether it actually is going to help you or if it's going to harm you. That I never knew, looking back, laying on that Publix parking lot, maybe 15, 20 years later, the potential for that being a defining moment that I'm talking about from a podcast later as a mind-body PhD, and the potential light in that moment and how I chose to view stress in that moment changed the trajectory of my whole life. So I like to use this example. The glass is not half empty or half full. It just contains a liquid in it. So we're labeling whether it's empty or full as negative or positive, and we're defining it. Let's just call it liquid in a glass. Let's remove this negative stigma around stress. Someone said to me, "Oh, I'm just hanging on by a thread." I'm like, "Oh, girlfriend, we're all hanging on by a thread." Some people are hanging on by one hand and they're beating themselves up by the other. Others are clawing their way back up to the top in this desperate hope of getting off this thread, this treadmill of life. And some of us are hanging upside down, just singing, hanging on by the thread. We're all hanging on by the thread. It's just a matter of perspective. It's a matter of how you want to choose how you're going to hang on to the thread. And I want to hang on upside down singing. It's just all in perspective. So stress is so overused, and it can be broken down into three categories. It can be acute stress, or it can be chronic stress, or it can be eustress. So I'm not going to get into acute or chronic because that can be found pretty much anywhere. But what is eustress? And it's based on this Greek word eu, which means good, and then stress. So eustress is a good kind of stress. Think of it like a new hobby or learning a new skill or stepping outside your comfort zone and having a really good time. It's when you force yourself to do something you don't feel like doing, but you want to kind of do it anyways, and you do it, and you feel really good. And there's some really cool neuroscience behind what part of the brain, the mid-ACC, the mid-anterior cingulate cortex, how in Ironman athletes and extreme athletes and people that push themselves to do the things they don't feel like doing, this part of their brain really grows, and it's called the seat of will. That's a whole separate podcast and something I'd love to discuss. But for this moment, when you begin to push yourself to do a new hobby, you actually grow this part of the brain, but you begin to feel good and you get to redefine what stress actually is, and you start new chapters in your life. That parking lot incident was a potential for a new chapter. So it's not that we all have stress. We're all hanging on by a thread. It's how you decide to interpret that stress. It's imagine feeling capable of handling whatever life throws at you. Whatever life throws at you, imagine that you can handle it. We all pretty much have the same amount of stress to some varying degree. It's our perception and our ability to handle it what differentiates us. One of my favorite movies is The Guardian, and I think this really, really describes it. And Kevin Costner was talking to Ashton Kutcher, and he was saying, hey, the only difference between you and the person in that 20-foot waves crashing up against the cliffs, one is panicked and one is there to save. You're both there in 20-foot seas crashing up against the rocks, but you have different mindsets. So we're all in this 20-foot waves getting crashed against the rocks. But what mindset do you want to have when you're in there? Are you the one rescuing? Are you one that's a victim? How do we begin to challenge ourselves to where we can see stressful events as I'll figure it out? And when you can begin to see stress as I'll figure it out, you have found the pot of gold. Eustress leads to the state of flow, and the healing power of flow is very, very real. Flow is the healing power that exists within all of us. So flow refers to a mental state in which a person is fully immersed in an activity with a sense of energized, focused, or enjoyment, or they're fully involved. So flow is characterized by this complete absorption into an activity. It's merging this action and awareness and this loss of self-consciousness, like you lose yourself in the moment, and almost as if it distorts the perception of time. And it occurs when we take on a challenge, when we're having good stress. And this has psychological and these physiological benefits. So the state of flow plays a major role in promoting healing. So when you ask yourself, what state of flow can I accomplish today or this week, or is my child in a state of flow? And by the way, video games or doom scrolling, as much as I love my TikTok, it will never be a state of flow. A state of flow is doing a challenging activity, and your child video gaming, getting in the flow, that's not flow. That's actually an active limbic response. So understanding the state of flow in eustress can help you really begin to shift your mindset. So this sense of determination that not all stress is bad, and believing so can exponentially create and foster more disease. So when you look at this concept of flow, what in your life brings you a sense of flow? For me, it's horseback riding. I love riding a horse with no saddle and no bit. And I like getting in tune with my horse's breath, and my breath and her breath get synced. And I think our heart rates get synced. I can tell when she's getting ready to bolt in a direction. In the state of flow, I almost don't even blink. And you'll notice in a state of flow, you might not blink very much, and your brain waves are really slowing down, and the perception of time just goes away. And you feel good. And it might have been a stressful event, but you're experiencing this high levels of enjoyment. And what comes from it is intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is bred after you reframe what stress is and you enter the state of flow. So if you're looking at anxiety or gut issues or autoimmune, when you can begin to shift your belief system that not all stress is bad, you'll figure it out. And then you can begin to somehow find some sort of activity, whether it's biking, walking, listening to music, any sort of activity that brings this level of enjoyment that is a little bit of a challenge. You begin to have intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation increases self-efficacy. The opposite of anxiety is self-efficacy. Anxiety is fear you can't do something. Self-efficacy is I'll figure it out. So by changing the concept of stress, entering this flow state, you begin to reduce anxiety, and you're shifting your focus from your worries and your negative thoughts, and you're shifting them into this sense of fulfillment. Flow is this sense of fulfillment, and it begins with redefining stress. So this emotional uplifting can counteract any negative emotional states that are often associated with chronic illness and pain. And people say, well, I'm too sick to get out of bed. I'm too tired. I agree, but do it anyways. I've been too tired to get out of bed. I've been too nauseous. I've been so dizzy that the room is spinning. It felt like I was hungover and I hadn't had an ounce of drug or an alcohol or anything. You do it anyways. That's the whole point of building up that part of the brain. You do it anyways. You're going to be in pain one way or another. You're going to be nauseous one way or another. Do you feel any better laying in bed being in pain? Do you feel any better laying in bed being nauseous? I didn't. Might as well get up and do something. If you're going to be nauseous and in pain, might as well be doing something that you kind of enjoy, even if it's for 1 or 2 or 3 minutes. I really wanted that pub sub. I was in a lot of pain. I was embarrassed, but I did it anyways. And that moment shifted my whole life. So flow, when you force yourself to do something, you begin to actually get into this flow that releases these neurochemicals like endorphins and serotonin and dopamine. And these chemicals enhance your mood and reduce your stress. So even if you do it for 1 to 5 to 10 minutes, even if you're in chronic debilitating pain, that's 1 to 5 minutes when you have an enhanced mood that you would not have otherwise had. You just got 3 to 5 minutes of your life back that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And those little micro movements lead into macro change. And one day, if you keep doing them, you're going to look back and go, oh my gosh, I had a good day. It's cumulative. It begins to add up. So flow and Eustress act as a natural painkiller. It's diverting attention away from the pain and discomfort. So if you force yourself to get up and do something, even though you're nauseous, even though you're in pain, if you do it even for 1 to 3 minutes, you're diverting attention away, and these neurochemical changes begin, and they begin to start reducing pain sensitivity because you're developing new neural pathways. So for all my beautiful souls out there with chronic diseases, and I have been there, I know. If someone told me to get out of bed, I'd be like, but I can't. And that's right, you can't. But you can decide to anyways. And frequent experiences of flow improve quality of life, even if it's 1 minute at a time. It's 1 minute that you didn't have yesterday. It's 1 minute that you got back. And it's providing this meaningful, enjoyable activity that begins to have a cellular change. I talk about this in my book, that how do you empower your child to do this? And having a sick kid who had to take a year off from school, she had to be homeschooled because she was too sick with arthritis after COVID to go to school. So I made this decision based on clinical evidence and my own experience. I allowed my daughter to pursue her love of theater over her schoolwork. And I doubled down on my decision, and their dad's amazing. He completely supported and trusted me in this. He's like, all right, Skylar, I'm going to trust you. And she could miss school all day long, and we let her go to theater at night. And 3 years later, my decision is still paying off in dividends. I knew by letting Ella participate in theater activities would enhance her social connectiveness, increase her self-efficacy, I'll figure it out, build her resilience to stress, increase her window of tolerance of being active again, and engage in a state of flow. I could care less if she even passed ninth grade. I was playing chess, not checkers. I don't care if she passed ninth grade. I wanted my kid healthy again. So when she began designing costumes, especially these historical period pieces, it's really stressful learning what thread and textiles were available in year 1502. But she gets in this deep state of flow, very focused on these difficult tasks at hand, which bring her joy. So up to this point, I had been playing chess, not checkers. I'm playing the long game, and I'm getting these looks of like, your kid doesn't go to school? Like, nope, she doesn't. She stays home. But she goes to theater? Yeah, she does. And watch, this is going to work. I knew by reframing stress that she could enter a state of flow, and I was tackling two major components of her disease. I was disengaging her limbic system, which she was in this chronic fight, gotta go, fight, and increasing her ability for Eustress, her ability to reduce pain. And I will forever hang my hat down on that single concept. It was a major catalyst in my child's health. It was a healing tactic that I used on myself, that I try to impart that wisdom onto other parents. And I just had this talk with a parent last week. I was like, so much effort is on your child's grades, and your child's mental health is gone. This child's right on the verge of the cliff where it's really hard to bring them back from. Is it worth it? Are their grades really worth it? Is it really worth getting the A at some private school to show off to other parents when your kid would rather not be on this planet anymore? It's not worth it. These grades, these pressures, it's not worth it. So I did something that was completely outside the box. We had to get tons of permission to do it. But I placed my bet on this horse, and it was a winning horse. She just did a play last night in a lead role, and SAT tutoring, and off to do the SATs, and almost has a full scholarship now. It paid off. So when you begin to introduce the concept of flow and Eustress to your child, and in this case, letting schoolwork go on the back burner, so what? Who cares? You want them to have health and mental health. Even this is for yourself. Sometimes we have to prioritize putting activities that bring us joy in front of things like getting an A on a test or doing everything just perfect. So helping yourself and helping your child find this flow, and it's reframing that stress is not always bad. Stress can be good. Life's potential lies in how we define stress. Your life's potential defines on how you are going to define stress. I'm going to try not to harp on this concept too much, but mindfulness, being fully present in the moment, is my all-time favorite tool, and this is the parting tool I want to leave you all with. If you can incorporate mindfulness in a fun activity like grabbing your favorite candy bar, and you have your child do this, and a piece of chocolate, if chocolate is safe and okay, and you have the chocolate and you have it melt in your mouth, you don't do anything else. You just feel the chocolate in your mouth. How does it smell? How does it taste? How does it feel as it melts? How does it feel as it glides down your throat? This is a form of mindfulness. Just takes 3 seconds as you're enjoying a piece of chocolate. It doesn't have to be some moment where you go sit and meditate for 20 minutes in a studio. Mindfulness is a skill that we can practice 10, 3, 30 seconds at a time. It can begin with a piece of chocolate. And when you begin to view stress as a way to build up your tolerance into life, and that we are all hanging on by a thread, it's just, do you want to be hanging upside down, swinging? Or do you want to be clawing your way up? Or just beating yourself up as you're hanging there by a thread? We're all there. We're all in it together. But how can you shift it into the sense of not all stress is bad? Some of it can induce a state of flow, and flow heals. This concept I actually dive into. It's one of the chapters in the book on how to empower your child to heal. You know what's so funny is I did a recording this morning for an appearance on someone's podcast, and she said to me, I thought your book title was Empower Your Inner Child to Heal. And she was the second person that had said that to me within a matter of a week. So this book, I am finding out, and then I had a colleague of mine, a very, very well-respected PhD, read it for me. And he's like, I'm recommending this book to all of my adult patients. So very serendipitously, magically, this book is in a whole new arena I didn't even expect it to be. And adults are reading the book to heal their inner child, because when you look at it, I laid this out from a child's perspective and from a parent's perspective all the way to adulthood. Anyone who has suffered anxiety, gut issues, or attachment issues, or autoimmune, and you don't have a child, what I have found is this book still applies. You get a roadmap of how you got that way. You can see my parent attachment style was this. I caught my parents' vibes here. Oh, this is what I became, a victim or a martyr. So this book is kind of hitting two populations that we never really expected. It's giving you the roadmap and keys to things like secondary gains, flow, eustress, attachment styles, stress contagion. These are all things that when we heal our inner child, we can discover how we got to where we're at, or we can heal our children. So I genuinely hope that the book brings this sense of awareness and answers for so many people. You can find it on Amazon now in Ingram, Sparks, and Drafted Digital. It's Empower Your Child to Heal. And you can also get a free chapter of the book if you want a sneak peek at drschuyler.net. And the chapter book, the freebie, is Healing Phases, going from victim to warrior. I'm sending you all an abundant blessings and happy healing vibes your way. Thank you for your time. I feel so grateful you have listened to the end. When we begin to understand how our body manifests stress, trauma, depression, anxiety, and even unexpressed emotions, we then create a space and bandwidth in our minds to begin to heal our bodies. Healing is a decision, and I am grateful for yours. Abundant blessings, Dr. Schuyler.
To learn more about the work Dr. Schuyler is doing, please visit drschuyler.net. That's drschuyler.net. And remember to subscribe to this podcast wherever you like to listen.
Produced by Audivita Studios. Connect your voice to the world.